The room was silent, except for the mechanical hum of an old ceiling fan that had seen better days. It spun above a cracked, nicotine-stained ceiling in a forgotten corner of Newark, New Jersey, the kind of place people pass without ever looking twice. But behind one of those windows, obscured by years of dust and silence, a voice existed. A voice that could stop time. A voice no one had heard. Not fully. Not yet. Her name was Alana Brooks. 27 years old, unnoticed, uncelebrated. The kind of woman who blended into spaces like shadows in overcast light. Not because she lacked beauty, far from it, but because she'd mastered the art of disappearing. It wasn't shyness. It was survival. And in America, where visibility often came at the price of authenticity, Alana chose silence. She worked nights cleaning offices in downtown Manhattan. 5 nights a week. Same train. Same faded backpack. Same playlist of dreams she never dared share. She would hum softly while wiping down glass walls and empty conference rooms, just enough to keep her spirit from collapsing under the weight of routine. But never loud enough for anyone to hear. Because Alana had learned, a long time ago, that dreams only became dangerous when other people noticed them. Her mother had taught her that. "Keep your gift to yourself, child," her mother used to whisper, eyes scanning windows as if the world were always listening. "Not everyone will love you for it. Some will want to steal it. Others will try to break it." It sounded paranoid at the time. But years later, after her mother was gone and the world kept spinning without pause or mercy, Alana understood. She understood that some dreams weren't killed by failure, they were strangled by fear. And that fear, it lived in her bones. But that night, that precise, insignificant-seeming Tuesday in early March, something shifted. The kind of shift you don't feel until you're too far to turn back. The kind of moment that begins quietly, like the sound of a dropped pin in an auditorium. The kind of moment where fate stretches its fingers toward you, unannounced. It began with a song. Alana had arrived early. She always did. There was something sacred in the stillness of an empty skyscraper. The way the city's noise melted behind the glass. She was on the 42nd floor of a luxury law firm, with views of the Hudson that made her feel like a ghost floating above the chaos. That night, the sunset was violent, a fire bleeding across the sky, and maybe that color did something to her. Maybe it reminded her she was still alive. Or maybe, for the first time, she forgot to be afraid. She started to sing. Not hum. Not whisper. Sing. And it wasn't rehearsed or careful. It was raw. Broken. Honest. Like something cracked open inside her, and what came out was not just sound, it was memory, pain, longing. A voice wrapped in every heartbreak she'd buried, every apology she'd never spoken, every dream she'd folded and hidden away like old letters in a shoebox. She didn't know that someone was listening. Across the floor, through a glass door left slightly ajar, a man had paused mid-step. He was holding his phone, ready to call the elevator, when her voice stopped him cold. He didn't speak. Didn't move. He just stood there, paralyzed, because something about that sound reached deeper than logic. It touched something older. Something sacred. His name was Elliot Graham. He wasn't a music producer. He wasn't even in the music industry. He was a business consultant with an office 2 floors below. He happened to be there late because of a last-minute meeting. He wasn't supposed to hear her. He wasn't supposed to stay. But he did. And in those 37 seconds, something inside him refused to forget. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know where the voice came from. But he knew one thing. He had to find her. When Alana finished, breathless and stunned by her own release, she opened her eyes and immediately felt the heat of being watched. She froze. That old instinct kicked in. Hide. Deny. Vanish. But when she turned and saw the silhouette in the doorway, something inside her didn't run. It flinched, yes. But didn't retreat. He took a step forward. Slow. Measured. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to. I didn't know someone was here. She nodded, voice caught in her throat, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You have a beautiful voice," he said, quietly. "Sincerely. What's your name?" That question. It lingered in the air like smoke. What's your name? Not, who do you clean for? Not, how long have you worked here? Not, are you supposed to be up here? Just a name. Her name. As if it mattered. She didn't answer. He didn't press. Instead, he gave her a card, slid it gently onto the edge of a marble desk, and backed away like someone trying not to scare a wounded animal. And just before the elevator doors closed behind him, he said one last thing. "If you ever decide to stop hiding, I think the world's been waiting for you." Then he was gone. And Alana stood alone with the echo of her own voice and a business card in her hand that felt like a trigger. She didn't sleep that night. Not really. She stared at the ceiling of her one-bedroom apartment in East Orange, running over every detail, every word, every breath. Her first instinct was to throw the card away. To burn it, even. But something stopped her. What if? That question clawed at her, over and over, like a loop that wouldn't end. What if this is the only time the world looks your way? What if you say no, and regret it forever? What if you say yes, and lose everything? The next day, she did nothing. She showed up to work, cleaned the floors, pretended not to hear her co-workers gossip about everything and nothing. That night, she didn't sing. She barely breathed. But 3 days later, while waiting for the F train in a tunnel that smelled like rust and rain, she called the number. "Hello," came the voice on the other end. "This is Alana," she said, pulse in her throat. I'm the one who sang." There was silence. Then, "I remember. I've been hoping you'd call." And just like that, the world tilted. But she didn't know, not yet, that this moment, this tiny decision to speak, would unravel everything she thought she knew about herself. Because sometimes, life doesn't wait for permission. Sometimes, it just opens a door and dares you to walk through. And Alana was about to discover what happens when you stop hiding and start living. The cafe was too bright. Alana sat by the window, legs crossed tightly, fingers locked around a lukewarm mug of coffee she hadn't touched. Outside, Manhattan moved in its usual choreography of chaos. Taxis honking, strangers brushing shoulders without a glance, scaffolding clanging like distant thunder. Inside, everything was calmer. Too calm. Like the kind of quiet that made you feel exposed. She had chosen a seat with her back to the wall, instinctively. Years of shrinking into corners had rewired her nervous system. Always watching exits, always measuring people before they had a chance to look too long. She was 5 minutes early. Maybe 10. She had rehearsed what she might say. She had told herself she wouldn't stay long. But none of that mattered the moment she saw him. Elliot walked in with the kind of presence that didn't ask for attention. It simply took it. He wasn't loud. He didn't move fast. But there was something in his eyes. That quiet focus. Like he was always thinking 2 steps ahead, scanning for something he couldn't quite name. He spotted her instantly. "Alana," he said, with a soft nod, removing his coat. "Thank you for meeting me." She managed a tight smile. "I don't usually do this. Meet strangers in cafes?" "No," she said. "Answer doors I didn't knock on." He paused, then smiled. Not the patronizing kind. The kind that saw something. A wound, maybe. A familiar fear. He didn't push it. "You didn't knock," he said. "But you sang. And that's louder than most people ever dare to be." That made her chest tighten. He was saying too much. Too soon. "I shouldn't have done that," she replied, gaze fixed on a crack in the wooden table. "I usually keep that to myself." "I know. Why are you doing this?" she asked, sharper than she meant to be. "You're not a producer. You're not a label." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, voice low. "Because I believe in recognizing value when I hear it. Even if it's not in my job description." She said nothing. She didn't trust compliments. Compliments always came with expectations, and expectations had teeth. Alana, he continued, I don't want anything from you. No contracts. No pressure. Just talk to someone. A friend of mine. She runs an independent studio in Brooklyn. Very low-key. No spotlights. No marketing machines. Just real people who care about real music. She looked at him, searching for the catch. There was always a catch. Why me? She asked. You don't know me. You heard me for half a minute. I didn't hear you, he said. I felt you. There's a difference. That silence again. Heavy. Sticky. She looked down at her hands. So many calluses from years of scrubbing, lifting, enduring. Hands that weren't made for pianos or microphones. Hands that didn't belong on stages. What if I'm not good enough? She whispered. What if what you heard was a fluke? Just noise dressed up as something more. Then at least you'll know. And not spend the next 30 years wondering. That hit her harder than she expected. Because she was wondering. Always. In the quiet moments. In the subway tunnels. In the bathrooms of penthouses she cleaned, staring at mirrors that reflected lives she'd never be invited into. She wondered who she might have been, if things had been different. If fear hadn't planted itself in her chest so early, so deep. What if I don't belong in that world? She asked. Elliot's expression didn't change. But his words dropped like stones. Maybe the world doesn't get to decide that. Maybe you do. She didn't sleep that night. Again. She lay on her mattress. No bed frame, no headboard, just a mattress on the floor of a cramped apartment with water-stained ceilings, and stared into the dark. His words echoed. Not in her ears, but in her bones. Maybe you do. No one had ever said that to her. Her whole life had been a long list of things decided for her. Where she lived. What she could afford. Who she couldn't be. Dreams were luxuries for other people. People who didn't have to choose between rent and groceries. But now, for the first time, there was a door. Not wide open. Not welcoming. But cracked. And on the other side, possibility. She didn't tell anyone. Not her cousin Jasmine, who would have warned her not to get her hopes up. Not her co-worker Tasha, who would have begged for details and then posted them online. This wasn't for public consumption. This was private. Sacred. She showed up at the studio 2 days later. It was nothing like she expected. No flashing lights. No security guards. Just a brick building tucked between a vegan cafe and a tattoo parlor in a sleepy corner of Williamsburg. The sign read Rose Room Studio, hand-painted, chipped at the edges. The kind of place that didn't scream success, it whispered authenticity. She almost turned around. But then the door opened. And a woman with short silver braids and a nose ring smiled at her like they'd known each other in another life. You must be Alana, she said. I'm Mercy. Come in. I've been waiting for you. Waiting. That word again. As if the world had been holding its breath. The studio smelled like incense and wood polish. The walls were lined with instruments that had clearly seen stories. A baby grand piano sat near the window, keys worn, soul intact. They didn't record anything that day. Mercy didn't even ask her to sing. They talked. 4 hours. About life. About fear. About the weight of silence. Mercy didn't speak like a coach. She spoke like someone who had bled for every note she ever released. Someone who knew what it meant to bury your own voice. And when Alana finally sang for her, quietly, nervously, like offering a wound instead of a melody, Mercy closed her eyes. And cried. No compliments. No applause. Just tears. Which meant more than any standing ovation ever could. You're not just a singer, Mercy said, after a long pause. You're a mirror. You make people feel themselves. That's rare. That's dangerous. Don't run from it. And in that moment, something cracked open inside Alana. Not a transformation. Not yet. But the beginning of one. The first time she stood in front of a microphone that wasn't part of a cleaning cart, Alana forgot how to breathe. It was a Tuesday. Cold, gray, indecisive, the kind of day that couldn't commit to rain or light. She had arrived early again. Always early. Mercy said it was a sign of discipline. But Alana knew better. It was fear disguised as preparation. If she arrived early enough, maybe she could tame the chaos before it saw her. The studio was dim, intimate. Mercy had lit a candle in the corner. Not for ambience, she said, but for grounding. This isn't performance, she told Alana. It's release. But the second that mic turned on and the headphones wrapped around her ears, everything inside her clenched. She felt naked. Not physically, emotionally. Like every broken promise she'd swallowed, every word she'd bitten back, was now lined up behind her vocal cords, daring to be heard. Her fingers trembled. Her jaw locked. She couldn't look at Mercy. Couldn't look at herself. The track began. Soft piano, sparse strings. A simple instrumental, just enough to hold her voice. And she couldn't sing. Not a note. She opened her mouth and the air caught in her throat like it belonged to someone else. I can't do this, she whispered, stepping back. Mercy didn't move. Didn't flinch. She just sat in the chair, calm as moonlight. What are you afraid of? She asked gently. Alana didn't answer. Because she didn't have the words. Not then. Not fully. But it wasn't just fear of failing. It was fear of confirming what she'd always suspected, that her voice, her story, her truth, would never be enough. That the silence she had lived in was safer than being seen and misunderstood. Start with a hum, Mercy said softly. Don't sing. Just feel. So she did. She closed her eyes. Blocked out the walls, the candles, the city beyond the glass. And she hummed. Low. Tentative. Like testing the temperature of water before stepping in. And slowly, like a muscle remembering it was once strong, her voice found itself. Notes uncurled like smoke from her chest, not perfect, not polished, but honest. She didn't sing the lyrics. She let the melody move through her, no pressure, no form. And when she finished, the room held its breath. Mercy didn't clap. She didn't compliment. She stood. Walked to her. Placed both hands on Alana's shoulders. And whispered, that was the first time you told the truth. Alana felt tears sting the edges of her eyes, not because she was proud, but because she was exhausted. From carrying the weight of what she'd never said. From pretending that hiding wasn't slowly killing her. That night, on the train home, she didn't listen to music. She listened to silence. And in that silence, for the first time in years, she felt space. Inside her chest. In her mind. As if singing hadn't just released sound, it had released pressure. But the next morning, the voice returned. Not her singing voice, the other one. The crueler one. The voice that lived in the walls of her mind, whispering doubts like scripture. You're not ready. That was a fluke. You're just a cleaner pretending to be an artist. She ignored it. Tried to, at least. But fear is clever. It doesn't knock loudly. It seeps. It weaves itself into everyday things, the way a barista looks at you too long, or a coworker asks, rough night, when they see your eyes a little red. By Thursday, she almost called Mercy to cancel their next session. But she didn't. Instead, she showed up. Quieter. More guarded. But present. They didn't record that day. They just talked. About sound. About shame. About why some people are born with gifts they spend their whole lives trying to bury. You know what I think. Mercy said, eyes locked on hers. I think you're not afraid of failure, Alana. I think you're afraid that you might actually be everything you were told you weren't. Alana didn't speak. But her silence said enough. Because deep down, a part of her knew it was true. There was a fire inside her, not loud, not wild, but constant. And it had been burning quietly for decades, waiting for someone to notice. Maybe this was that moment. Or maybe it was the beginning of something she wasn't yet ready to name. It started as a whisper. Mercy posted a clip. 43 seconds. No name. No face. Just a black screen with audio and the caption, "You ever hear a soul beg to be freed?" Alana hadn't agreed to it. But Mercy hadn't promised she wouldn't. She said the world needed to feel, not know. Alana didn't sleep that night. Again. Not from fear this time, but from something stranger, exposure. The kind of invisible spotlight you can't see, but you feel. Like your soul standing naked in the center of a stadium while the world stares in silence. She didn't check the post. Didn't want to know. But curiosity is louder than fear. Especially when it's dressed as denial. By morning, the clip had been shared over 5,000 times. By noon, it was climbing to 20,000. Comments flooded in. People asking, "Who is this? Why do I feel like I've known this voice my whole life? Why is this making me cry in the middle of work?" Alana sat in the corner of the staff break room, phone in her lap, hands shaking. No one at her job knew. She hadn't told anyone. She didn't want their faces to change when they looked at her. Didn't want the weight of their opinions. Not yet. Jasmine called that night. "Girl. This is you, isn't it?" Alana went silent. "I knew it," Jasmine whispered. "I'd recognize your pain anywhere." Alana wanted to laugh. Or scream. Or crawl inside her skin and disappear. But all she said was, "Please don't tell anyone." "I won't," Jasmine said. "But, Alana, it's time. Time." As if her life had been on pause. She hung up and sat on the floor of her kitchen. The hum of the fridge was the only sound. She felt the weight of years pressing down on her, every time she said no when she wanted to say yes, every moment she chose silence over risk, invisibility over desire. Now the world had heard her. Not her name. Not her story. Just her essence. And somehow, that was even more terrifying. The next studio session felt different. Mercy greeted her with a look she couldn't quite read. Not pride. Not relief. Something closer to reverence. Like watching a fire finally admit it was born to burn. "I want you to write," she said. "Not just sing. Write something that's only yours." Alana hesitated. She hadn't written anything in years. Not since her mother died. Not since she buried the notebook full of lyrics beneath a floorboard like it was something shameful. "I don't know if I can," she said. "You can," Mercy said. "But you'll have to bleed a little." And she did. That night, she sat on the edge of her bed with a notebook Mercy gave her, blank, no lines, and stared at the emptiness. It terrified her. The possibility of what could be born there. She wrote slowly. Words at first. Then sentences. Then lines that didn't rhyme but ached with truth. The song took 3 days. She called it Window Light. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't polished. It was raw. Like grief finding its breath. A story of a little girl watching the sun pour in through a cracked window while her mother hummed a melody that never made it to the world. She recorded it on a Friday. 1 take. She cried through the second verse. Mercy didn't stop the session. Didn't edit the sobs. Because the pain was the performance. That night, they uploaded it. No caption. No hashtags. Just, Window Light, Alana. Her first name. Nothing more. Enough to be found, but still hidden. By the next morning, the track had passed 100,000 plays. Her inbox flooded. Independent producers. Vocal coaches. Journalists. Labels. Everyone wanted something. Everyone suddenly believed in her. But none of them had been there when she couldn't make a sound. None of them had held her voice like something sacred before it became valuable. She called Elliot. "I don't know what to do," she said. "They want meetings. Offers. It's all too fast." "Then slow it down," he replied. "This is your life, not theirs. Don't chase a light if it's going to blind you." She sat with that for a long time. This wasn't about fame. It was about reclaiming the parts of herself she'd buried to survive. The music wasn't the dream. Being seen without fear was. Mercy offered her something no contract ever could: ownership. Of her voice. Of her pain. Of her path. So Alana didn't answer any of the offers. Not yet. Instead, she booked another studio session. And started writing her second song. She hadn't meant to look for it. It just found her. A message. Buried between hundreds of others. No subject line. No signature. Just a sentence that hit like a whisper behind the ear. "Does your voice still sound like hers?" Alana froze. She read it 3 times before she could breathe again. Her thumb hovered over the screen, the rest of her body motionless, locked in a silence that felt older than her. Hers. The word coiled inside her ribs like smoke from a fire she thought had gone out. There were things she didn't talk about. Parts of her story she kept folded like old letters in the back of a drawer she never opened. Some ghosts had names. Some didn't. This one did. Camille. The sister no one ever talked about. She was 16 when Camille left. Not died. Left. Walked out the front door one night, during one of their mother's mood swings, and never came back. No goodbye. No letter. Just silence. The kind that echoed for years. They'd been close once. Close enough that their voices used to braid together like vines, harmonizing over the sound of the radio in the kitchen, mimicking gospel riffs they had no business singing. Camille was fire. Loud, bold, reckless. She was the one who should have made it. Who deserved to. But fire can't survive in houses full of water. And their mother had oceans of pain she never learned to drown. Alana never knew where Camille went. The phone calls stopped. The trail vanished. And then their mother died. And all that remained was silence and shame. For years, Alana wondered if Camille blamed her. For staying. For surviving. For not running too. Now, after all this time, this message, a single sentence, cracked the floor beneath everything she was building. She didn't respond. Couldn't. Instead, she went to Mercy's the next day like nothing had happened. She smiled. She recorded. She laughed when she didn't mean to. But her eyes kept scanning corners, her mind reaching into shadows it had learned to ignore. "You're not here," Mercy said softly, after her third take collapsed mid-verse. "I'm fine," Alana lied. "No, you're protecting something." That's the thing about singing. It's not a performance. It's an exposure. A confession dressed in melody. And Alana's voice, once open and raw, had started to flinch again. That night, she took the train all the way to Harlem. She hadn't been there in years. The old building was still standing. The paint on the bricks was chipped. The front door looked smaller somehow. The street was quieter than she remembered. Or maybe the silence was inside her now. She didn't go inside. Just stood across the street, hands in her coat pockets, eyes fixed on the window that used to be theirs. Hers and Camille's. Twin beds. Shared dreams. Whispered harmonies after lights out. It hurt to remember. Not because the memories were bad, but because they had no ending. Everything had just stopped. And she had never asked why. Back in her apartment, she opened the message again. Her hands trembled as she typed. Camille. No reply. Minutes passed. Then one word. Yes. That was all it took. Alana dropped the phone. Covered her mouth with both hands. Not crying. Not breathing. Just overwhelmed. The kind of overwhelmed that doesn't have language. She picked it back up. Typed. Why now? Another pause. Then, I heard your voice. I never thought you'd use it again. The weight of that truth shattered something inside her. Because Camille had heard her. Out there, somewhere, in the vast void of the internet, the girl who once shared her voice had recognized it, not through a face or a name, but through sound. She didn't reply that night. She couldn't. Some wounds need silence before they can hold words. The next day, she went to the studio with a different kind of heaviness. Not fear. Reckoning. And she told Mercy everything. The story. The sister. The silence. Mercy didn't interrupt. She just listened, eyes full of understanding only found in people who've been shattered too. Write her, Mercy said. Camille. No. The version of her that lives inside you. The one you never got to say goodbye to. So Alana wrote. Not a message. Not a song. A letter. She wrote to the girl who taught her how to harmonize with pain. Who left without warning. Who she never stopped singing with in her dreams. And in that letter, she let go. Of guilt. Of resentment. Of the ache of not knowing. It didn't fix everything. But it made space. And in that space, a new melody was born. The offer came on a Wednesday. Alana was eating instant noodles at the corner of her kitchen counter when the email lit up her screen. The subject line alone made her pulse shift. Atlantic Records, let's talk. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she just stared at the screen, spoon paused mid-air, watching her own breath catch like it didn't belong to her anymore. She read it. Then reread it. Then set her phone down like it had become something fragile and flammable. The next morning, her name was in headlines. The anonymous voice behind Window Light reveals identity. It hadn't been her choice. A popular YouTube channel had traced the clip to Mercy's studio and leaked her first name. Then came the videos, the TikToks, the Reddit threads. She woke up to thousands of strangers dissecting her voice, her lyrics, her pain, like it was public property. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a version of who she was supposed to be. And in the middle of that chaos, the industry came knocking. Big names. Bigger checks. Promises she never thought she'd live long enough to hear. We'll pair you with top writers. We can rework your image, something fresh, marketable, urban but clean. Think minimalistic soul, a little edge, but still digestible. You'll be huge, Alana. But we'll have to polish your sound first. Some of those raw parts, they're not mainstream enough. She sat through 2 meetings. Smiled politely. Nodded when expected. But inside, she felt like she was being offered a chance to become someone else. Not bigger. Not better. Just quieter. Cleaner. Safer. They wanted her voice. But not her story. They wanted the ache without the memory. The pain without the origin. And Alana knew what that meant. They didn't want her. They wanted to bottle her echo. The next night, she went back to Mercy's studio. Alone. Mercy had left it open for her. Keys under the flower pot. 1 candle lit. No pressure. Alana sat at the piano. Hands trembling, not from fear, from the weight of clarity. Because now she saw it. The trap wasn't failure. The trap was almost authentic. Almost free. Almost seen, but filtered through someone else's lens. She pressed a single note. Then another. Then sang, quietly, unpolished, no headphones, no mic. She sang like she did when she was 9 years old and the world hadn't yet told her she needed permission to be whole. She sang like the girl Camille used to sing with. Like the woman Mercy had seen on that very first day. And as she sang, she realized something that cracked her open from the inside. She didn't need to be chosen anymore. She had already chosen herself. When the song ended, she didn't record it. She just sat there, in the stillness. No applause. No deal. No audience. Just truth. It was enough. The next morning, She wrote back to Atlantic Records. A single line, "Thank you, but no." No explanation. No apology. She closed the laptop and took a breath so deep, it felt like the first one in years. The world didn't stop. The offers kept coming. Some angrier. Some pleading. One even called her ungrateful. Another asked, "Do you really want to waste your moment?" She smiled at that one. Because they didn't understand. This was her moment. Saying no was the most powerful thing she'd ever done. Weeks passed. Then a month. The hype cooled. The blogs moved on. And the silence returned. But it wasn't the old silence, the choking kind. It was the sacred kind. The kind that made space for newness. For healing. For truth. She started uploading music on her own. Nothing viral. No gimmicks. Just songs, raw, unfiltered, written in notebooks she used to be afraid to open. Songs about shame. About memory. About growing up in a house where love had rules and dreams had curfews. Songs about the girl who stayed. The sister who ran. The mother who burned out before she could bloom. People listened. Not millions. But enough. Enough to build something real. Enough to matter. And then one night, months later, she received another message. Different number. New name. Camille. A voice memo. She hesitated before pressing play. Then, her sister's voice filled the room. Older. Softer. But still fire underneath. She was singing. Alana's lyrics. Her melody. Window light. Reimagined. A harmony added where silence used to be. The voice that once disappeared had returned, not to take, but to sing with her. At the end of the message, Camille said one thing. "I'm proud of you for staying." And that was it. No drama. No reunion montage. Just two voices, no longer alone in the dark. That weekend, they met. No cameras. No studio. Just a park bench and two women who had once shared a window to the world. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Because sometimes, survival doesn't sound like screaming. It sounds like singing the same song, after years of silence, and knowing the other person still remembers the melody. Alana never became a global icon. But she became something far rarer. Whole. She now teaches songwriting at a local center for girls who were told to shrink. She still records, raw, soft, soulful. No filter. No compromise. And sometimes, when she closes her eyes and sings, she swears she can hear her mother humming softly in the background, not as a ghost, but as a memory finally laid to rest. She hid her gift for years. Until the world looked her way. But the real change didn't come from being seen. It came from daring to stay visible, even when the world stopped looking. If you liked this story, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.